arranging it. Every December I get a call from Carolyn. Must be December, Carolyn's calling me. Well, let's get started. This is the second, I think. Oh, it's working.
Good.
Nope, we're all good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It works fine. We're good. All right, this is the second in a series of three. Last week we talked about the number 2 reason why people have a hard time over holidays, and that's because they don't have a family to go to. And today we're talking about the number 1 reason that people have a hard time after the holidays is because they did have a family to go to. We're going to talk about family difficulties, which is the main reason my phone rings off the hook in January. So let's start with a prayer. Lord, thank you for this beautiful place. Thank you for this opportunity for us to think about how to live in a way that might be a little bit more like Jesus. Pray, Lord, that you would bless these moments, bless these words, bless these people. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. The end of the Bible ends with a promise that the Lord is going to come back, and that's really on an up note. It's the end of the New Testament. The end of the Old Testament ends with a warning and a curse. This is the end of the Old Testament. Malachi 4:6. See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction. You get it? Look out. Your children need to restore your hearts with your parents, and your parents need to restore your hearts with your children. Some of you should leave right now and go take care of the business, because you know that's a pretty awesome warning, right? That family matters, and it's important for us to restore our hearts. And it's extremely common for people to have injuries in families and brokenness in families, and that you hurt the people you love the most. It's true, we do. And we have to work at it to restore family relationships, or bad things will happen. Bad things will happen if you don't restore relationships with the people that you love the most and are closest. Over 25% of the kids in this country live in a fatherless house. That's of all across the country, over 25%. Unmarried women giving birth in 1980 was 18%, and in 2021 it's 41%. 41 in America. It's America. Don't feel bad, France. It's 62. Of course, it's higher in the poor communities. It's up to 78% in poor communities. 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. The single most important cause of poverty and crime is fatherlessness in the home. So family matters, and if you don't restore the hearts of parents, the hearts of children, bad things happen. That's just what the Bible is saying, is warning us, saying, look out, you guys need to take care of business, or bad stuff happens if you don't. But it's not all doom and gloom. The Brookings Institute has studied this for years. They've tried to figure out how did we raise people out of poverty? What do we do? And they looked at this very carefully, and they've done years of study on this, and they came up with 3 things. Some of you probably already know this. It said, if you do these 3 things, you can raise yourself out of poverty. Doesn't matter what your circumstances are. If you do these 3 things, doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, or what color your skin is. If you do these 3 things, you will raise yourself out of poverty. Number 1, finish high school. When you finish high school, you get a full-time job. Number 2, get a full-time job, any job, full-time job. Number 3, wait until age 21 to get married, and then wait to have children after that. Those 3 things, you have a 75% chance of going from poverty to an annual income of $55,000 a year. That's what the research says. And only 2% of people who did those 3 things stayed in poverty. Well, you can do those things. Those are doable things. We can do that. If we take responsibility for our lives, and I think take responsibility for our family lives. we can make a big difference. We can make a big difference. The single you can get from that, the single worst thing you can do is to have a child too soon and not have a family to raise a child in. So families matter. That's my point today. Families matter. No matter how far away you move from your family, you can't really remove the effect of your family. You know, I tried that. I moved 3,000 miles away from my family, thought that would solve it, right? It doesn't. I just had to do more therapy. So there isn't really that person out there that for me was living in Tulsa. It was the one living in my head. You know, that was really the one I had to do business with. You have to take care of your family business or it goes with you. As Judith Viorst says, who wrote a book on losses, necessary losses. Absence makes the heart grow frozen, not fonder. If you haven't resolved your family business, you know, I've talked to some men who said they were very unresolved issues with their fathers. Would say, "I don't want my dad's name mentioned in this house again." Like that would solve the problem, right? It doesn't. It doesn't. You take it with you if you don't do your family business. And we regress. If you get around your family members, your ability to function shrinks for most of us. I have a very good friend who's a psychologist, and he doesn't do it so much anymore because his parents are now deceased. But when they were alive, when he would go home, he would start acting like he was 15 again. And this guy had a PhD in psychology. He'd been to wrestle around with his brother, and they'd be down on the floor, two 40-year-old men wrestling on the floor. We regress. We go backwards. We relive old times, and sometimes, especially if those old times have unfinished business. I think we need to be aware of our issues with our families. You think about it and help be open about it, and not just try to push it under the ground. That doesn't solve it. So there are two problems with families, two issues that people have. One is them, and the other is you. And it's not all them. Now, none of us had perfect parenting. We know more about that now. We know about attachment and emotions. We know that we need to pay attention to how we feel. I mean, how many of your parents went to hear a psychologist lecture on anything? I mean, really, yeah. My parents didn't even know what psychology was, really. When I went into psychology, my dad couldn't figure that out. He was an engineer, you know. What do you guys do? Like talk to people. And they pay you for that? Yeah. We need to be known in a way that we understand now, but we didn't understand before. So yeah, we can criticize our parents because they didn't do things right. They didn't know what to do right. They didn't know what they didn't know. And so we've learned a lot now. But yeah, you're right. A lot of our parents didn't do things right. Peter DeVries says, "When I can no longer bear to think of the victims of broken homes, I began to think of the victims of the intact ones." My parents never divorced. My parents stayed together. You know, the 50s sort of generation was, they didn't divorce. That doesn't mean they had good relationships. They just didn't divorce. That's all that meant. With the statistics used to be, you lived longer if you stayed married. That married people lived longer than people who were not married. We would find out that's not true. You know, it's not true. That used to be true, right? No, you live longer if you stay happily married. A lot of people who are miserable in their marriages and they die just like everybody else. It doesn't help them at all. So yeah, we need to pay attention to the quality of our relationships. And sometimes people are better off not staying with that guy or that, you know, be fair. Could be either one. But we know now the importance of mirroring, we call it, that infant researchers now know that if you attune to someone else, you know, that it creates brain development in a way that we didn't know, that you can help people be more connected to others by paying attention to their feelings. Paying attention to feelings is now just as important as paying attention to what they think. We didn't know that. We know it now. And we know that that kind of attunement the need for that starts very, very young. Now, hopefully I'm going to be able to show a video. Let's see if we can get that.
Ready to start it?
I'm ready to start it. We'll see. This is an experiment with technology. This is Dr. Edward Tronick. He's famous for an experiment called the still face experiment. He's going to explain this research.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
Like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world.
What he's saying is mothers and babies have a natural kind of interaction.
They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's
The natural
really
communication
what the
between mothers and infants
is used to.
happens quite naturally.
Then he asked the mother
Then he asked the mother to just
not
look with a still
respond to
face.
the baby.
Not angry, not happy, just still face.
The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother.
Points. Mother doesn't
She
look,
points.
still face.
The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says,
Within seconds.
"What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like,
That
come
screech,
on,
you know that screech?
why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Immediate stress within 90 seconds. Creating business for the rest of us. So you get it. Within 90 seconds. And this is not an angry look. It's not a punitive look.
Like
It's just
good, the
blank.
bad, and the
Just
ugly.
blank. It's called the still face experiment. So
Is
from infancy
that normal
on,
stuff
we
that
know
goes
that we
on,
need
that we all
interaction.
do with our kids.
You need
The
back and forth.
bad is
You know,
when
something other than
something
just
bad happens, but the infant can overcome
think
it.
about
After
this.
all, when you stop
Your
the
mother
still
was
face,
depressed,
the mother and the baby
and,
start to play
you
again.
wanted to
The
get
ugly
some
is
interaction with her
when
from her. You
you
couldn't,
don't give the child
because she
any
was
chance to
unable
get
to
back
respond. Think if you were in a
the
marriage
good. There's
with
no
someone
reparation,
who
and
gave
they're
you nothing
stuck
back.
in that really ugly
I get
situation.
this in my office all the time, where it's men more than women. Where men, you know, they call it stonewalling. They don't just respond, right? And they say, "What? I didn't say anything." Exactly. This is exactly the problem. Not saying something affects people greatly, and it can be just as damaging as the things that are said,
if not more.
sometimes more. Yes.
I've had various interactions with autistic people.
Yeah.
And autism varies, but most often they do not interact with you when you're talking to them. And initially I felt insulted, but then I realized what the problem.
Right.
So you do have an initial reaction to that when someone just stares at you and doesn't, you're talking to them, but they're just like blank.
Right. Right. You feel it. And we can help autistic people realize that. You know, we teach them things where they know, oh, I'm supposed to smile now. You know, that I need to interact. Yeah.
This Christmas, I was watching my 5-year-old grandson interact with my 9-month-old grandson. And there was a moment there where something frightened the 5-year-old. And the 9-month-old followed right in.
Yep.
All of a sudden, his face just contorted and he
Knew
was
it.
frightened. He was taking his cues from his room.
Knew it immediately. There's communication that's happening, right?
The update, I was a pediatrician for 43 years.
Great.
In the late 90s, 2000s, when the iPhones came in.
Yep.
I'd walk into an exam room and there was the 18-month-old, the 2-year-old, with their screen
Yep,
and the mom on her screen. It was exactly that.
right,
Um,
right,
These were good moms.
right. No, I know. Well, you know, just before that, you know, we thought it was a good thing to play baby Mozart, you know, and put children in front of the television and play Mozart for them. That was a relief for me, you know, just play me Mozart, that'll help them. We didn't know, then now they're doing the research and now we know. This is dangerous, the lack of interaction, the lack of human responsiveness. So we know this now, we didn't know this then. We didn't know it before. So you guys were raised before anybody even thought about these things, right? Me too. Here, yeah.
Now, that was a video of a baby, and I'm an emotionally well-adjusted adult, so surely that doesn't apply to me, and I don't have emotional attachment fears anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, look, we're all trying to achieve secure attachment. That's what we're all trying to do. And so it's on a scale, right? So you get some responsiveness, and the point is that there's an extreme of a lack of responsiveness that we can feel it. You can immediately feel it. And add to that, we're all different. I might need more than you. You might be fine with a little bit of mirroring. I might need a lot. So it depends on the person, is what I'm saying. It's not black and white. It's not black and white. But yes, we need responsiveness, and saying nothing says something. So I think about that, you know, in your relationships today, especially in marriage, think about that. You do have a responsibility to respond, to say something, because it makes an impact on the other person if you don't. So we know these things. So parents, our parents, most of the people in this room never saw a video like that and never talked to a psychologist, and they didn't know, and we know. And so now we're trying to be better parents now than the previous generation, and that's what they would have wanted. They would want us to do better than them. The other problem, so it's them, the parents didn't know stuff, and we should be mad at them for what they didn't know. And two, it's you. Like I said earlier, not everybody's the same. Some children need more than other children, and remember, even though nobody had perfect parents, your parents didn't have perfect children either. So the door swings both ways. Think about it this way. Adam and Eve had the perfect parent and they still screwed up. So sometimes it's on you. Sometimes it's on them, sometimes it's on you. And now that my kids are older, I keep telling them that. This door swings both ways. Two children can grow up in the same family and one turns out angry at their parents and the other one doesn't see what the problem is. That can just happen that way. As Betty Davis said, the famous psychologist, if you've never been hated by your child, then you've never really been a parent. You draw a line in the sand, you have to. Sometimes you say no, and sometimes they don't like it. You know, now at least we know to say, listen, I can understand why you want to go to Mexico with your friends when you're 14 overnight. And I get that you're mad at me because I'm saying no, but you're not going. So you try to acknowledge your feelings, but you still draw the line and they get mad at you. That actually happened to me. And some children are more sensitive than others. We now know we have this designation of HSP, highly sensitive persons. We didn't know that before. There's actually a bunch of research on this now. There are some people who just feel the light, that's too bright for me, and the room is too cold, and the noises are too loud. And we didn't know this before. They're neurologically just more wired to feel and hear things. And like my wife she's not here today, but she's definitely HSP. She just feels things. She's not hungry. She's starving. You know, it's just how she's wired. She's an actress. That's what they do. Those of us who are married to them are highly insensitive people to them because I didn't hear that. I didn't feel that. I didn't. And but now we know it's just a thing. You're that way or you're not that way. But we didn't know that before. So sometimes think back that maybe you're an HSP and you didn't know that. Nobody diagnosed you, but it's not a defect. It's just a way of understanding yourself, I think, and feel deeper than other people. I'm saying about Mariah. Mariah is a good daughter. Her father ran a successful business. and mother was a stay-at-home mom. She got straight A's, always friendly, got along with everyone. All the teachers loved her. She wasn't this way because she loved school so much. She was just afraid not to do well. She was the youngest of 3 kids. Her older sister acted out, and the younger ones often, when they see that, they think, okay, I'm not doing that. You know, that path caused a lot of grief for everybody. I'm gonna go this way. I'm just gonna do things right, not cause problems. And especially not burden my mom. So the last thing she wanted to do was disturb. That's why she put it to me. I just didn't want to disturb anyone. Don't disturb my mom, but she got enough on her plate. Sadly, her father became ill and had to stop working, and her mother had to step in and start running his business. So you can imagine what that was like. She has 3 kids and had to run his business. So she worked hard in school. She got scholarships. She went to one of the best universities in the country, and she put herself through school, didn't disturb mom, didn't need money from mom. She was a good daughter. Her father passed away while she was still in college, and it actually just kind of made things worse because now her mom didn't even have her dad in her life, who she loved. Mariah was and still is a highly sensitive person. She never shared her feelings with anyone, although she had lots of them because she didn't want to disturb her mom. Her mom had enough on her plate. She married a hardworking guy, strong personality. He was raised in a dysfunctional alcoholic home, so he didn't talk about his feelings either. That was a good fit for her. You know, I don't talk about my feelings. You're not going to make me do that. You don't talk about your feelings. We're just going to be good people. And they were. They're very good people. They raised 2 good sons that were good, hardworking men today. So after many years of a good marriage, and everybody would say that because they were always smiling, or he was always smiling. She was always kind of a little frown on her face because she was made sure she had to do everything right. And he was, you know, adult children of alcoholics don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. They live by that sort of axiom. So he just was going to laugh everything off, and that made him a nice guy to be around. So at one critical point in their marriage, after their sons were actually out of the house, he fell ill. Her husband fell ill with very serious illness, and she was trying to do everything she could to help him. And one of the ways that she tried to do good is to not fight with him, because that's what she was raised to do, not disturb him. But at one point, he wasn't in his right mind because of the illness. And she said, we got to go to the hospital. And he said, no, we're not going to the hospital. I'm not going to any hospital. I don't need hospital. And he almost died because of the illness that he had. And when he fell unconscious, then she could call the ambulance because she didn't want to disturb him, which almost killed him. So they ended up in my office. You know, she's like, we thought everything was good, but I can see now it's not. There needs to become a time where I can say how I feel. I got to say, no, this is not right. I couldn't. She lived her whole life just trying not to disturb. So they had a good marriage. They still have a good marriage, but nobody's perfect. And the strategy of being a good daughter in her childhood was not making her a good wife in her adult life. So sometimes these strategies we learn as children don't work for us as adults. We need to think them through. Sometimes they do, but think that through. You might be doing some of the strategies you learned as a child that's not working for you anymore as an adult, but you didn't know that. And someone would have to point that out to you. Typically, it's our spouses. But in this case, he was quite happy with us not talking about our feelings. So actually, my therapy with Mariah is helping her to disturb her husband. That's what we're working on. It takes a while for her to figure out how she feels, and she just knows something's not right. Something's not right. Well, let's slow down, right? So something's not right. So how you feeling? It takes her a while to say, well, I'm hurt, maybe I'm angry. I don't know. Maybe angry. I don't know. And believe me, he's not any easier. But as she gets in touch with her feelings and says how she feels to him, it helps course correct their marriage. Where they go, maybe we need to do this, go this direction. But it's that back and forth with their feelings that helps them get a more accurate direction to go. Feelings are information. That's what it is, information. You just need all the data. They were making decisions based on part of the data. This needed all the data. And as she gets more in touch with her feelings, and she can say, I don't like that, or that's uncomfortable, and risk disturbing him, he actually is getting more in touch with his feelings. And he can say how he feels. And he's got lots of stories about the alcoholism in his family and why it was really good to not say how you feel. You need to just go in the other room or hide somewhere where dad can't find you. And he's got a, you know, at the age they are now, they're unlearning all that stuff and realizing, okay, maybe that was smart to act that way as a kid. It's not smart anymore as adults. We need a new strategy. So they are unlearning some of the things they learned to survive difficult childhoods. So what we learn from our families is very powerful. It's very influential, very powerful. And I think it's good to reflect on that. What was your family like? What did you learn? What were you told? What do you believe is your role and how are you supposed to be? They're the first people in our lives and often the most significant. And it's important to listen to the messages that we were sent. And there's an old Jewish saying, how many Jewish mothers does it take to screw in a light bulb? None. She just says, don't worry about me, go ahead and have fun. I'll be fine sitting here in the dark. That sends you a message, right? There's a message there. And indirect communication is very powerful, like we saw in the still face experiment. We call it unconscious nonverbal affective communication. Unconscious nonverbal affective communication is very powerful, where we're sending messages to people back and forth without any words. We don't need words, especially in the area of fear and anxiety. You've heard me say this before. The area of the brain that registers fear and anxiety is 5 times faster than the prefrontal cortex, the part that does the thinking, which, and it makes sense. Think about it. You know, if there's a lion jumping out at you, you want to react to that. You don't want to think about it. You know, what should I do? No, you react. So the fear center of the brain registers things before the thinking part of the brain even knows what's going on. And we've studied this. Like not me, but other people have studied this. They can show pictures at just a fraction of a second of an angry face to people. So it doesn't register. You don't know that you see it, but the amygdala sees it. You know, it registers. See if it's a fraction of a second, an angry face. And then we give them a series of letters. I think they used Chinese letters or something, and said, what do you think this is about? And if they saw an angry face, they said, well, somebody's pretty mad. I don't know what they're saying in Chinese, but they're angry. I know that, you know. And if they didn't see the angry face, they go, I don't know. Is it about a child playing? I don't know. I don't have any feelings about that. So we can make you angry or afraid without you even knowing it. Without you even knowing it. We pick up on signals, subliminal communication. Those of you who are in advertising, you already knew this, right? You know, you can make people buy your product and they don't even know why they're doing it. But especially fear and anxiety centers of the brain, we pick up on those things very, very quickly without words, So we need to think this through. You learned things in your childhood. You learned how to avoid danger in your childhood, and you didn't even know that's what you're doing. You just knew. Don't go there. Don't do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to talk about my feelings. That's going to get me in trouble. Well, then you get married and you figure out people want to know how you feel. So families have myths. They have identities. They have rules that they live by. They give structure to difficult relationships. We have rules that we agree to, often unspoken, but sometimes spoken. It gives us a sense of identity from our family. And family members will police the myth and they will keep outsiders out and family members in some families. And it requires a certain level of insightlessness, we call it. I don't want to have any insight into it. I just know this is how we act. This is how we act in our family. We do this. And we're not going to really dig into it too deeply. This is just how we are. Those are our rules. Some examples are the Jones family is athletic. The Smith family is open. The Adams family is independent, or we don't talk about unpleasant emotions here, or women are strong and men are weak in our family, or we're used to hard luck, bad times, but we don't quit. That's who we are. Or we're close no matter how we feel inside. And everyone's going to see us as a close family, and it doesn't matter how you feel about it. We're close. We can only trust family members and no one else. Now, what happens when you have those myths in your family? You develop what we call pseudo-mutuality, where you learn that conformity is more important than community. So what we're going to do is act the same and let everyone else know that we're the same. But are we really connected to each other? What doesn't matter? What matters is that we follow the rules and we have this pseudo-mutuality. When the need to fit together perfectly becomes too strong, then pseudo-mutuality results and differences become threats. So in families like this, the difference is a disagreement. If anybody's different, that's a disagreement. You can't be different. You have to not say that you're different. So examples are adult children feel guilty every time their parents disagree with them. They need to hide their feelings and matters from them. Spouses are afraid to disagree for fear of abandonment. Members become too afraid of assertiveness or to compete. And members repeat their own family myths in their children, teaching them that differences are bad and like-mindedness is essential. Well, we're different. All people are different. That's actually the strongest relationships are one where we have differences, but then we can accept each other with our differences. Those are really the strongest. This is a pseudo form of mutual. And sometimes we take this out into our workplace and we think, well, that's how we're supposed to conduct ourselves in life in general. Because conformity is more important than community. A major research firm researched all the major universities in the country and asked the students on campus, how free are you to share your opinions? And one of the most famous universities in the country, 50% of the students said, I don't feel safe to share my feelings. I was like, what? I thought you went to university to dialogue and debate and have different ideas. No, we're even extending that out into our community. There's such pseudo mutuality. You don't feel safe to share your opinion? Yeah, that's when conformity is more important than community. And that can be a problem. So another question to ask yourself is, did your family give you an assignment? Did you have an assignment? Were you the leader? Were you the one who is not as able and you need help? Were you the pretty one who doesn't have to work hard for things? Are you the guilty one if it goes wrong? Did you have an assignment you were doing? Now, most of us recognize the process of growing to adulthood means you're going to have to disagree with your parents. My kids know that very well. That you get to a certain age and they have to have their own mind. And you know, my 18-year-old daughter has an AI app where she can get psychological advice, which she prefers over her dad. I don't know what it's telling her, but it's an app and she says something and it gives her advice back and it's all she's her own person, right? She's 18, she has to have her own mind, she has to think her own thoughts, you know. She told Barbara and me that there's no way she's going to stay in California when she goes to college. She's going to New York. That's where she's going. New York. Maybe Chicago, but New York sounds better. Just because it's farther. She's already studied in France. You know, it's already had a 2-week study there. You know where she's in college right now? Chapman. 55 minutes away. Yeah. I consider that a victory. Of course, she's at Chapman because I told her I didn't want her to go to Chapman. That's a terrible school. Don't go there. She comes home for the weekends. But she's asserting her independence like we all do, like I did, like you did at some point, maybe. You realize I need to have my own mind. But sometimes we still have that assignment back in the back of our mind, and we end up repeating it. One way to deal with our need to separate from our parents is to adopt what they told us on their own. You know, like, well, no, that's who I am. The person that we told her she's going to adopt for herself, but she made up her own mind to be that person. So maybe you did that. Maybe you were given a role in your family and you've adopted it on your own. But the true resolution of this power struggle in families and this dealing with dynamics and what you were taught, and you want to be your own person, it doesn't involve rebellion. You don't actually have to rebel in order to be a healthy person. But you do have to have communication that recognizes the differences. See, the most powerful relationship is not conformity. The most powerful relationship is not when we all agree. The most powerful relationship is when you say to the other person, you know, I can understand why you think that way. That's a very valid way of seeing things. It's a lot of intelligent people hold that position. I don't happen to agree with it. That's okay. You don't have to put them down or denigrate them or rebel against them or make them bad because they disagree with you. That's the strongest relationship. A cord of many strands is not easily broken. That's what we want to get to, is we recognize the differences, appreciate the differences. We don't have to rebel, nor do we have to conform.
How do you get to the finish line then? In a couple's relationship?
When a couple's relationship, it's not easy. The finish line meaning making a decision, right? Yeah, because you do have to make decisions. There are decisions that have to be made. Well, here's the good and bad news. We know when couples fight, a guy by the name of John Gottman has studied this, right? Couples fight, you know, and he measures them and what they fight about.
Disagreements.
Yeah, disagreements. Yeah, disagreements. We'll call them disagreements, right? 70% of the time, couples disagree over things that cannot get solved. 70% of the time. What are you fighting about? Something that's already happened in the past, something that's going to happen in the future. You know, parents, in-laws. You're not going to get rid of the in-laws, not going to get rid of them. They're still going to be there. So 70% of our arguments are over things that never get solved. So 30% of the time, we have to make a decision. You know, we got to make a choice. We're buying the car, we're not buying the car. What are we doing? You know, and that takes negotiation skills, right? But most of the time, we fight over stuff that can't be solved. So then you have to ask yourself, why are we fighting? Why are we fighting about this, right? We're fighting because we want that sense of mutuality, real mutuality and respect. What you want is the other person to say to you, well, you know, I get it. Why you see it that way? I get it. No, that makes sense. I don't have to agree with it, but I get it. We want validation more than agreement. We actually want validation more than agreement, which is to validate the other person's point so they feel valued and respected. That's what we want. And if I don't feel that you value and respect me, I'm going to fight with you. And I'm going to make you respect me, which doesn't work, right? So most people spend all this energy fighting, looking for validation when they think what they want is agreement. 70% of the time, no, we're looking for validation, not agreement. And then the 30% of the time, you got to really work on your negotiation skills. You know, you're going to be respectful, and because you do have to come in intimate relationships, you got to come to decisions. Now, at work, it's different. Very few people are in love with their bosses. If you are, you probably have a problem. And it's not a love relationship. At the end of the day, your boss just really wants you to get the job done. You know, I don't care if we love each other or not. In marriage, it's different. In marriage, at the end of the day, getting the job done is not as important as whether or not we like each other. You know, that's more important than getting the job done. So it's a different set of rules. Different set of rules. Sometimes the rules at work don't work at home. You have to, you know, understand what our goal is. What's our goal? And in marriage and in family, really the goal, we think, more than anything else, is connection. I want to feel connected. If I don't feel connected to you, then we're in a fight. We have a fight. And Sue Johnson has this whole set of skills, how we do that. How do you fight fair? And I'll come back and do a whole lecture on that. All right, let me give you an example. What's an example of this? Mitchell. Mitchell was an HSP. Mitchell was a highly sensitive person. But Mitchell, unfortunately, was raised, well, he's 70 now, so you do the math. So he was raised in the 50s with parents who had no idea what a highly sensitive person was. And they just knew he was a sensitive kid. And in the 50s and 60s, that was not a positive thing, to be a sensitive kid. He was raised by a traditional family. His parents were from the greatest generation. So his father fought Hitler. And so he was, you know, that was the point of his life. You know, we killed Hitler. You all should be grateful. And that was it. We don't talk about our feelings, put a roof over his head. And that was the end of the conversation. Well, Mitchell couldn't help it. He just felt things and thought things that were just more intimate, were deeper. And so he was the kid who was always disrupting the family conversation. Yeah, but what about You know that? There was a case, it was on Friends, I think it was, and went all the way to the Supreme Court, where men were saying inappropriate things, and so women sued them, this is, I don't want to talk that way, you can't force me to do that. And the lawsuit went all the way to the Supreme Court, they decided, no, that creativity is more important than people's rights in the writers' room. Any writers in the room, you know that case? That a writer told me about that, because she was on that show. That you can get away with that in Hollywood, to be arrogant and controlling, but if you're brilliant, it's okay, you get a pass. So he was really great at work and lousy at home. So he was a lonely, guilt-ridden man who couldn't seem to make relationships work. So it took quite a bit of time, but we eventually got to the root of his pain. He thought he was racked with guilt, but as you all know now, guilt is not the same thing as shame. Guilt is about what you do, shame is about who you are. Guilt is actually helpful, shame is not. If you feel you're defective, if you're broken, if you're unworthy of love, that's a problem, that's shame. Guilt is when you do something wrong and it motivates you to want to apologize. I feel bad, I said that. When I said last week, I feel bad, I'm sorry. That makes relationships better. Guilt is healthy, it's about what you do. You can get forgiven for that. You can't get forgiven for shame. You just feel that something's terribly wrong with you. So he was using guilt as a defense against shame. So what do I mean by that? He was constantly saying, oh, I should have done this, I shouldn't have said this, I shouldn't have said that. He was always focusing on his behavior because he didn't want to really look at the fact that he actually felt unworthy of love, because that's what he was always told. His parents didn't say you did a problem act, they said you are the problem. That's shame, the shame. He was constantly torturing himself until we came to realize, no, Rachel, I don't think it's really about what you said last week. I think we've got to ask ourselves why you said it. Why would you go into a rage? And think about it, what would you rather feel? Really angry or ashamed and unworthy of yourself? I would feel angry. I would too. So his anger helped him not feel the shame, that sense of brokenness and unworthiness that he was taught he shouldn't feel. So we're still working on it, but the pain is starting to lift because we talk honestly about how he really feels. And tell me how he really feels and how he got there, and we have this real genuine conversation. Sometimes he even gets upset with me because I won't say the right thing back. It's really easy to hurt the feelings of someone who feels a lot of shame. So it's real easy. So I hurt him and he gets mad at me, and then we work that through, and gradually he's starting to feel better about himself, because what does heal shame? Grace. What heals shame is acceptance. It's an experience of acceptance. If you see me who I really am, in all my brokenness, not in all my grandeur and my successes, but in my brokenness, and you still accept me, that heals it. That's what heals it. And that's what he never got. He never got parents who saw him for who he was and accepted him for who he was. The highly sensitive, brilliant person that he is. He's less angry and controlling now because he's more aware of how he feels. And he's got a pretty good relationship with a pretty good woman for over a year now. It's looking good. I'm optimistic here. So our families can give us messages, and sometimes those messages can be pretty damaging, because it isn't just his parents' fault, it's also the way he was and what he believed about himself. He was a highly sensitive person, and he needed more than what he got from his parents. But they didn't know that, and he didn't know that, and he had to figure that out. So that's why we talk about childhood, is to figure stuff out. Not so we can blame your parents, but so you can take responsibility for it. Oh, that's how I got here. That's why I feel what I do. I'm going to change that. I'm going to see myself differently. So what we don't want to do is blame. That's a trap that doesn't get us anywhere. Many of us use anger to keep history from repeating itself, and blame is a tool that we think is going to help us. So let me make a distinction here. There's the anger of protest and anger of despair. Protest and despair. Anger of protest is actually a good thing. Anger of protest is, we can be better. We can, you know what, I'm mad because this isn't right. What's going on here is not right. We can do this better. And my anger is energy to solve a problem. That's what anger is supposed to be, energy to solve a problem. Anger of despair is I give up. I can't work with this. I want out. You're hopeless. Despair is the anger that ends it. Protest is the anger that tries to make it better. So figure that out in your life. Are you angry at your family? Are you angry at the family you created? Are you angry at your children? What's the anger? Is it I give up, I can't work with you, you're a Mitchell? Or is the anger, no wait, we can do this better. We can do this better. I'm angry because I'm hurt. And the hurt is I know that we can do better than what we're doing right now. But there's a human tendency to blame. We want to blame someone for suffering. If I'm hurting and I'm suffering, then it must be somebody's fault. So we try to figure out who that is. Sometimes we blame ourselves, sometimes we blame the other person. And blame looks backwards. That's rarely helpful looking backwards. Accountability is looking forward. It's like, hey, now we want to do this better. That's not blame, that's accountability. We're looking forwards, and blame looks backwards. Because we're trying to make the world make sense. We want to blame our parents because we want to live in a world that is rational and it makes sense. We don't think we got this way out of randomness. We don't believe it's somebody's fault, right? So we blame our parents as if that gives us an explanation. Not usually helpful. What we want to do is look honestly at how we got the way we are and have honest conversations with our parents and with our kids and with our spouses. Many people think that if you go to a psychologist, what we're going to do is blame everything on your mother. What you're supposed to do, that's what Freud did. And the therapy will say, it's not your fault, your mother's fault. It's her fault. And there's something inside of you that goes, toilet training. And no, they didn't know how to toilet train in the 50s. No, that's not what we do. We talk about your history so that we can understand how you got this way so that you can take responsibility. Not blame your mom. You know, especially now that I'm a parent, I'm loath to blame parents. But blaming yourself isn't the solution either. Like Mitchell did. He believed the messages that he got, and so he blamed himself. Like he was the problem. That doesn't help either. You're trying to make the world make sense by taking responsibility for everything, because that way he could make changes. You know, if it was his fault, he would take responsibility for it, and then he could change. But that just caused him to spiral down in shame and the feelings that he was broken, a broken machine. Remember Job's comforters? They came to Job, whose life was a mess. And they said, blessed is the one whom God corrects. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. We have examined this, and it is true. So hear it and apply it to yourself. Many well-meaning people have said, well, it's God's will. I heard people say that when they lost a child. And someone would say something like, well, you know, it's God's will. It's not helpful. Don't say that. Yeah, I had one woman come to me who lost both her parents and her brother within a short time, like a year and a half. And she was an elder in her church, a different church. And people would say to her, well, it's the will of God. And she comes into my office and says, I can't stand Christians. She's an elder. They're platitudes. Don't say platitudes. You know, don't say things like that. Just listen. Often that's the best thing to do in those horrible circumstances. But we don't know what the solution is. We try to make it make sense. You know, it must be God's will. That's how it is. Don't say that, because when that's happening to people, that's not how it feels to them. They feel it doesn't make sense, and nobody really understands why this happened. Sometimes we blame the victim in our attempts to preserve our view that it's a reasonable world. It must be reasonable. There's an Iranian proverb: if you meet a blind man, kick him. Why should you be kinder than God?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. It's based on the same thing, that we want to make the world make sense, right? And if there's someone who's disabled, must be God's curse. So that now my world makes sense. No, sometimes it's random. God causes the rain to fall on the righteous and the unrighteous. There are certain things that you don't understand why they happen. And you can't force that into a box by saying something that must be God's will. Big problem in the 80s?
In the 80s with AIDS.
Oh, with AIDS, right.
Was-
Remember that? God's curse.
I volunteered at the cemetery and it broke my heart hearing
What people said to them.
and thinking
Right.
why they are.
And then they have to say, well, yeah, right. Must be, God doesn't love me. Right. That was horrible. We've come a long way since then, but yeah, some of us have, right? Some of us have. There are many churches which are repentant of those early days. And we remember talking to Lewis Speeds, who was a professor at Fuller, and he wrote a very popular book called Sex for Christians. And I thought it was very helpful. He talked openly about sex. And just before he died, I asked him, well, you don't talk about the LGBTQ community in your book. And just before he died, he said, I wish I had. I wish I had. And he wrote in the 80s. Looking back on it now, I wish I had included our brothers and sisters. The church has failed us.
So question for you. You and your profession have spent the last 100 years making a lot of progress in understanding both what makes us feel what we feel and what the importance is of those feelings in all of our behavior in all of our lives. And it probably started 100 years ago because the prior 100 years, if you look at our own society and our own culture, the prior 100 years were extraordinary. If you look at it from today's point of view, you would look at those people and you say they had extremely traumatic lives.
Yeah, true.
And they were coming out, the way they dealt with trauma was to at least suppress grief, suppress feelings of loss,
Correct.
suppress feelings of loneliness. A lot of the feelings that they had no place to put them. You were losing family members, you were losing your life, you were losing your property, and sometimes in very traumatic ways. And so it was a very long struggle that went on, and I can visualize, by the time the temperance movement came around, there was a whole society had become alcoholic.
Yeah.
Because they were just traumatized, they were brutalized and traumatized. So the question is, okay, now that we've come along another 100 years and made all of these observations and tweaks, shall we say, being an engineer, do you think that those tools and the things that we have learned would have made the prior century made their lives better? Or were they in a place where, no, suppressing emotions under those circumstances really is a survival necessity?
Right. You're making a really good point, is that we like to go back in time and imagine that we're superior to those people in the past because we know what we know now and they didn't know it. And I see people do that all the time. I think it's a mistake. I would say, yes, people surviving traumatic experiences have to hold their feelings in order to survive. We know this, people who are immigrants to the United States who are coming out of war-torn and they're escaping for their lives, they come to the United States. They get here to make a better life for their children. And them dealing with their feelings is next to impossible. They're just trying to survive, right? What they've seen, what they've had to go through, just trying to survive. What we don't want is that to be handed down to their kids, and they have some awareness of that. So I would say, yeah, if I knew everything I knew now and you transported me back 200 years ago, I'd find a way to be helpful. I'd talk to Freud and say, look, no, you're off on a couple of points. But talking about feelings, you're going in the right direction. So I think it is what it is. We can't project what we know now back in the past. past. I could say this, that people who are surviving trauma are not able to be vulnerable in the way that people who have not had to survive trauma. Correct, that's correct. But again, not everyone who goes through trauma ends up with PTSD. We're still trying to figure that out. Why is it some end up traumatized and others not? And the short answer is, if you find someone who's gone through a traumatic circumstance and they don't turn out with PTSD, it's because somebody was there for them. There was an uncle, a brother, a teacher, a pastor, a priest, someone that they could connect with and talk to, and that helped them survive their trauma. Psychological injury is not the same thing as trauma. You can be psychologically injured, but if someone is there for you, we can go a long way in keeping that from becoming trauma. So, but they didn't know that. You know, they were just trying to survive the previous generations. And also, it's not good to be vulnerable with your feelings all the time with everyone. You know, you got to choose your confidence wisely. You've already figured that out, right? You know, share your feelings with some people and go, that was a mistake. Yes.
And one of the big advances in trauma care has come about with this understanding the body keeps the score.
Right.
Many people in this room have read that.
Right.
And the idea that the feelings of trauma don't go away, they go into your body.
Right.
And that's where they're stored, and that's why a lot of these body techniques, et cetera, PBT is kind of in vogue now. We'll see how it works.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's be humble with what we think we know, but do our best. But you're right. Vanderkolk has done a lot, and he's the guy who invented PTSD, right? The guy who wrote Body Keeps the Score. He's the guy who came up with that term, working with vets. And he did a lot of crazy things trying to help people, hot yoga therapy and roll around the floor, anything that would work, to try and get people to the place where their trauma wasn't happening to them again and again, every day. The healing is when you get to the realization, well, that was then and this is now. That's good as it gets, you know. That was then and this is now. You don't ever completely get over it, but you get to a place where you're not reliving it every day. And so we've learned some things, helping people deal with their trauma. Yeah, what would it be like if you transport yourself back 200 years ago? They'd probably burn us at the stake or something. We're a witch.
They first check to see if you weigh more than a duck.
Yeah, if you float. Witches, like Monty Python reference. Actually, I heard they didn't burn witches at the stake in the United States. That only happened in Europe. We hung them here.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, we didn't burn a single witch in the United States. There were more civilized.
Actually, they did. They did.
They did
They
burn.
did burn. And hang, they did both.
I'm gonna look that up, because,
Yeah. There's a book called Killing the Witches that just came out.
oh, there's new research.
It's very interesting about the beginning of the United States. It started in Scotland, actually, in the 1600s, with the king burning witches at the stake. And then people came to the United States and started the colonies. It's quite an interesting book.
I'm gonna look that up. It's important to know this.
You never know when you're gonna need that information.
You never know. Updated, new information on witch burning. I just learned that. Latest results. All right, any other questions? I knew I wasn't gonna get through this. I'll give you the end of the story. What's the solution to this? What's the solution to family problems? The solution to the differences with people you have with your parents and they have with you? It's forgiveness. Forgiveness is where we all want to get to. What if you were raised in a family that wasn't perfect? What if you weren't the perfect child? What if you were the one that acted out? What if you were the one that was too good and that created problems? Forgiveness is the answer. And it's not excusing them. Let me read this. What we're not doing is excusing, substitutes for forgiveness. Excusing. Oh, he didn't really mean it. That's excusing, it's not forgiving. Denying, it was nothing. It's denying, that's not forgiveness. Tolerating, boys will be boys. It's tolerating, that's not forgiving. Forgetting, oh, I can't remember what she said now. That's not forgiving. Accepting, well, that's just the way mom is. That's acceptance, but that's not forgiveness. You forgive people for what they did, right? So you have to acknowledge wrongdoing before you can forgive. You gotta be honest, you know, that hurt, that really hurt, and I forgive you. And don't offer forgiveness when someone isn't asking for it. That doesn't work. You do it in your own heart. Yeah, you forgive people in your own heart. It doesn't go well. I tried that with my dad. It didn't go well. I got my PhD and I said, Dad, I'm gonna ask your forgiveness for the way I left home. So angry, and it was wrong of me that we got angry. And I want to forgive you too. And of course, he was greatest generation, right? So what did he say? I have nothing to be forgiven for. Because it's superior.
It's arrogant.
Yeah, it's arrogant. Yeah, to say to someone, I want you to know I forgive you. Don't do that. I was young. I was 30. But what you do want to do is forgive people in your heart. And that means you acknowledge wrongdoing and you forgive wrongdoing. We don't excuse it, we don't tolerate it, we don't deny it, we don't forget it.
And you can feel the difference.
You can feel the difference. We forget. It's releasing resentment. And I'll say more about that next time. Any other questions? Yeah, Barry.
Just a plug for one of the professors from your alma mater, Augsburg. There's a guy named Augsburger who went to, or taught at Fuller for years. And he has, he's done a lot of books on forgiveness. He has a series that's more for professionals, and a series that's more for the end user. And they're extremely practical. They give you steps on how to, forgive, go into a lot more depth than Mark had time for here regarding what's just tolerating, but they're step by step. They're really practical, really good books. I forgot his last name, his first name.
David,
Augsburger.
I think, is it
David, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Augsburger, and he has some really good books. You can just look up Augsburger out of Fuller. He's retired a long time ago.
Yeah, we've done a lot of research on forgiveness. It's a brilliant psychological tool that's not being taken advantage of to help people heal from all these issues that they've got. And it's something you do in your own heart. It's different from reconciliation. Reconciliation is when you have a conversation with the person and you reconcile. That's different than forgiveness, which is in your own heart and you do God. And you don't need the other person to do it. The reconciliation part, that's more complicated. So we have to talk. Great. All right, well, let's stop there and I will see you all next week.